Thank you, Reverend Jim Wallace, for that kind introduction. I am grateful to be able to stand in solidarity with so many faith leaders from across traditions, across this entire country, that have signed on to this critical and powerful and timely statement that I believe can help be a game changer in ending gun violence in this country. Sojourners is an ecumenical Christian organization that has been committed for 50 years to help inspire Christians of all walks of life to put their faith into action for social justice and peace. And in this particularly painful moment, I cannot think of a more important and pressing issue that needs our action right now. 4 days. That's how long researchers at Princeton University have found that people's sadness and outrage lasts after every major gun massacre in America. 4 fleeting days dishonors the lives that are stolen. 4 fleeting days isn't nearly enough time to break the political impasse and overcome the extreme stranglehold that gun lobbyists have on our politics, particularly on the GOP. As the days have passed since the horror in Uvalde and Buffalo and Tulsa, the killing has not stopped. According to the Gun Violence Archive, just over the 3-day Memorial Weekend, roughly a month ago, there were 15 mass shootings. Now, not all of them grabbed the headlines, not all of them were even known by the majority of Americans. We have had 233 mass shootings since the beginning of the year, and counting. And let me share with you another statistic that I believe not only breaks my heart, but breaks the very heart of God. The leading cause of death, as you've heard, for children and teenagers is guns, with more of our young ones killed annually than all soldiers and police officers combined. An obsession with guns has become a form of idolatry in our politics and in many parts of the church. And I want to speak in particular from my Christian faith tradition to Christian leaders all across this country. We must wrestle with these unconscionable statistics, both as a political failure, but also as an extreme spiritual failure. In the face of the epidemic of gun violence, people of faith must do 3 things. First, we must debunk the lies and mistruths that so often suffocate efforts to pass sensible gun reform. When pundits argue that gun rights are sacred and an unconstrained constitutional right, we must remind them that even conservative leaders like former Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia said this: like most rights, the right secured by the Second Amendment is not unlimited. It is not a right to keep and carry any weapon whatsoever in any manner whatsoever, and for whatever purpose. When politicians lie about the ability of background checks and stricter age requirements to prevent mass shootings, we must flood their phone lines with evidence that these policies can and do save lives. When radio hosts spread fear that gun reform advocates want to eliminate the Second Amendment and take away all people's guns, we must inform them that sensible gun safety laws would still enable responsible adults to own guns for hunting or for their personal safety. And when anyone dares to say that there isn't popular support for sensible gun reform, we need to say loudly and clearly that public opinion is squarely and overwhelmingly on our side. According to a recent political poll, 88% of the general public supports universal background checks. 80% supports age requirements of 21 to purchase a gun. And 67% support banning assault-style weapons, the same weapons that were used to cut down the lives of children and of adults in Buffalo and Uvalde. We must replace the spiritual lie, but it's not just about politics. we must also unmask a series of spiritual lies that so often undergird our addiction to guns and fuel public inaction. We must replace the spiritual lie that the right to bear arms somehow supersedes the right to life itself, with the biblical truth that every child and every person is made in the very image and likeness of God, and that every single life is sacred and worth protecting. We must replace the spiritual lie that the best way to restrain evil is for more people to be armed with weapons that inflict death, with Jesus' presumption of nonviolence. Jesus argued that those who live by the sword will die by the sword. Second, as people of faith, we must preach and teach and engage in courageous dialogue about gun violence and its root causes, even if this is uncomfortable or divisive in our congregations. Clergy and faith leaders in particular need to be unambiguously in support of sensible gun reform and evidence-based and holistic solutions so that we can address the root causes of our gun crisis. And third, we must sustain political pressure and elevate gun control to the top of our political priorities. I'm grateful for the bipartisan work that over 20 senators are engaged in right now, led by Senator Murphy and Senator Cornyn. And it is absolutely imperative that they accomplish as much as possible before the August recess and before the midterm elections. But let's be crystal clear. What is on the table right now represents a set of modest reforms that can only be the bare minimum of what is necessary in the immediate moment that we're in. We must get these wins and follow them with bold and decisive action to pass stricter background checks, to reinstate a ban on assault weapons, to raise the minimum age to 21 to purchase guns, and so much more. And as we do these things, then we can also pray. I believe in the power of prayer to both change hearts and minds and to move mountains of injustice. But as we know and as we've heard, simply offering thoughts and prayers in the wake of each horrific massacre of gun violence has become an empty ritual, as long as those prayers repeatedly fail to lead to sustained and bold action. I'm reminded of the words of the prophet Isaiah, who criticized those who practice shallow forms of worship that don't lead to a commitment to address the root causes of injustice. Isaiah proclaims, "Is this not what you call a fast, a day acceptable to the Lord? Is not this the kind of fasting that I have chosen, to loose the chains of injustice and untie the cords of the yoke, to set the oppressed free and to break every yoke?" So let us ensure that our thoughts and prayers lead to sustained and bold action. I'll close with this. After witnessing the utter and experiencing the utter anguish and grief and heartbreak after Buffalo and then Uvalde, I started to be filled with a sense of resignation and of cynicism that we would just be in another time loop of momentary outrage that quickly dissipated and ended in no measurable policy change. But then I started to reflect on the book of Hebrews. I reflected on that great cloud of witnesses that has come before us and continues to cheer us on as we continue to put our faith into action for justice. The author says that they don't have time to list out all of these names, to tell the story of Gideon and Barak and of Samson, of David and Samuel, and all the prophets who through their faith conquered kingdoms, administered justice, and gained what was promised to them, who shut the mouths of lions, quenched the fury of the flames, and escaped the edge of the sword, whose weakness was turned into strength, and who became powerful in battle and routed foreign armies. Well, this moment reminds me, and this passage inspires me, that we must write a new story for America, a story in which, by our faith, we conquer the despair and cynicism that so often surrounds this issue. That by faith, we help to push through legislation to pass bold gun reform that keeps our schools safe and our communities protected. That by faith we overcome the stranglehold of the powerful gun lobby. That by faith we turn outrage into ongoing action. And that by faith we become a powerful, incontrovertible force for saving countless of lives in our midst, particularly of our children. We can do this and so much more by faith. Let's do it together. Amen.